I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next, we will approve our agenda tonight. Anybody have anything to be added to the agenda? And we need a motion to approve, Colleen? Okay. Okay. Then the next item is to be approve the minutes of the May 20th, 2019 regular meeting minutes. Anybody see any changes or amendments to those minutes? If not, then somebody like to make a motion to approve those minutes?
I move that the minutes be approved.
Second?
Second.
Andy? All in favor? Do we need to vote on that one? Okay.
On, Mike.
Okay. I'll get this one of these days. Is that the one next to the system on? Oh, wait a minute.
You should throw the one up on top, Mike. Chair Price.
Oh, this one here. I'm sorry. Thank you. Okay.
The vote is 4 in favor. The motion carries.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Do we have any public comment tonight? Thank you, Colleen. Our first speaker, Marty Bitts. Come on up, Marty. Please state your name and where you live. Okay. And then you have 3 minutes.
I'm Marty Bitts, and my husband and I live at 5513 South Prince Street, so I was able to walk over. And I became aware, someone alerted me that my address had been noted at a previous meeting as an area that might be something worth preserving in terms of historical purposes. And I just wanted to express that I'm excited that with all the, extreme changes to the nature of the neighborhood around Main Street and Alamo Street, that somebody's interested in maybe preserving a few things to show what was early in our city. And that's what I had to say.
Well, thank you, Marty. Our next speaker is Pam Chadbourne.
This doesn't feed anything, but the light, that thing needs to. That mic. You were getting him down here and I was. Great. Good evening, Historic Preservation Board. So let's see if I can get through this. I'm here to say thank you about the post office and the possible new structures for historic significance. But first, I'm going to talk about the COA, which unfortunately isn't a hearing. And, these are the folks who thought so much of our town that they called it Littleton Mixed Use. And they want now more changes for a new tenant. And I'm going to say, that they came, the building, the entity came and said, oh, we didn't know we were going to have a bank downstairs, which we all know is not true, but we need an ATM now on the street, so you need to give us permission for the ATM. And in fact, they got that. And now there's somebody new who wants to change more things on the building. And the point is, it's never big enough, and it's never done. Regardless of what you folks say, somebody's always going to be coming in with their hand out. There's a lesson for you to learn here. And that's that in spite of all these ideas that people might have for our city, you guys have to maintain and hold a line. What is that line? I think we need more strength and understanding in that. I think the downtown design standards were undermined, and so you have less ability to do that now. But I see a problem with this COA, and let me just say, the tenant is like a workspace, right? WeWork is firing a whole bunch of people, thousands now. Is this a long-lasting sector? Should this building be modified for this use in a historic district? You really need to weigh the long-term impact of these structures on the city. That's your job. It's not to accommodate this tenant and that tenant, who after all are transient. Now, let me try to be nice for the rest. Thank you for the post office work that you all did with HLI as individuals. It was great to see it designated last week. It deserves it, and we need more of that. So I will comment, a member, should I give you credit? You told the comp plan folks be bold. This is the wrong way to be bold in Littleton, but you guys need to be bold because it's historic preservation that is most in danger and will go away if you do not take a stand. We need you to be bold and to be stronger. So thank you for undertaking your survey. Please get the criteria straight. It's got to look like more than, gee, we drove around and thought these things look nice. It's got to have structure and strength so that future people can carry this on. There are threats in the future land use map, and I'm going to point out two of them. All of downtown is called urban, which doesn't give you much room to do standards and guidelines for historic preservation. And we're losing institutional use, which monetizes properties, and that's a huge threat. We need more information about that. So maybe I'll get a chance to talk about it in the future. Thank you very much, Historic Preservation Board.
Thank you, Pam. Any other public comment? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move to general business, and we'll take up the case of HPB Resolution 04-2019, amending an approved Certificate of Historic Appropriateness at 2670 West Main Street. And the action is to approve some changes to the exterior of the building. So with that, Andrea, would you like to make a presentation?
Thank you, and good evening, Historical Preservation Board. I'm Andrea Mimnaugh, and I'm planner with the Community Development Department. Sorry, I've had a few difficulties. Sorry, we need in just another minute or two.
Well, while we wait, I'd like to introduce Ashley and welcome you to our city as a new assistant city attorney. Senior assistant, that's right. I knew there was an extra word in there. That's very nice to have you.
Chair Price, do we want to recess for 5 or 10 minutes until we work out these technical issues?
Sure. Let's recess for a moment. Let's take a brief recess while we work out these technical issues. That's okay. We knew ready, Colleen? Andrea? Okay. Well, let us have our staff presentation then.
Again.
It's white, so we should be good.
Okay. Again, I'm Andrea Mimnall with the planning staff, and tonight we have an application for a certificate of historic appropriateness for modifications to the Littleton mixed-use building. The proposed modifications are additional windows, doors, and sunscreens. Tonight's presentation on the certificate of appropriateness will cover 5 topics. We'll first talk about the approval process for a certificate of appropriateness, also known as a COA. Then we'll talk about a description of the application and its details. And then there'll be a section on the review criteria established by the city code and staff's analysis of how the application meets it. Then there will be the staff recommendation and then HPB action, meaning the actions that HPB can take of the application this evening. The Certificate of Historic Appropriateness application is the first of 2 applications in the process. A decision on this application is made by the Historical Preservation Board, and if approved, the applicant will need to amend the approved site development plan for this process, and that is an administrative process. So we move on to the application details. Let's see. Well, first we're going to talk about background. And this is the Littleton mixed-use building. You can see it in the photograph on the upper part of the slide. It's at 2679 West Main Street. It is in the historic Main Street district. It's a non-contributing building, and modifications must comply with the downtown design standards because it is a non-contributing building. The original certificate of appropriateness for the building was approved in February 2018, and that was for construction of the building, and construction was completed earlier this year. The proposed modifications are going to be to the east and west elevations. In the photograph to the west, the red arrow points to that west elevation. That's where most of the modifications are proposed. The photograph on the right is the east elevation, where we also have a modification proposed. So on the west elevation, 2 new windows are proposed towards the back of the building, and those are called out as number 1 and number 2 on the slide up there. A window is proposed to be swapped out for a door, as shown in number 3, and a wood pilaster is proposed to be removed to add more storefront window at the third story. That's number 4. On the east elevation, you can see number 1 is where the applicant is proposing to expand the band of windows to add another window with a sunscreen on top of that to match the rest of the sunscreens. There are 5 criteria for a certificate of historic appropriateness, but because the Littleton mixed use is not a historic structure, only 3 are applicable. The first is that the proposed work is compatible with development on adjacent properties. And this was addressed with the original certificate of historic appropriateness, in that the design of the overall building was found to be compatible with adjacent properties by HPB at that time, and that it was harmonious with the eclectic but simple, unassuming architectural design that characterizes structures within the Main Street Historic District. The proposed modifications to the east and west elevations are in keeping with the building style and should have little impact on the overall design. The applicant has specified that the same style of windows and doors will be used, providing the continuity. The next criterion has to do with demolition, and criterion asks about partial demolition is required for renovation of the structure. And in this case, yes, the partial demolition is required to add the new features. And staff has recommended a condition of approval that when the brick is put back in to fill in where it was removed, that the new grout be turned in, well, we have a mock-up prior to the new grout being applied, and staff will approve that prior to moving forward with that grout project. In terms of the downtown design standards, the objective here that is applicable to this project is to preserve the existing character of downtown Littleton and each of its sub-areas. The new building components will be consistent with the existing components, and so staff finds that this, as well as the other criteria, is consistent with the established criteria for the COA. The staff recommendation for the COA is approval with one condition, as previously mentioned, and that is, again, prior to the application of any new grout to be used to reconstruct areas where brick was removed, a mock-up shall be prepared and reviewed by staff to determine a substantial match to the color and profile of the existing grout. The Historical Preservation Board has several options tonight, and the first one is to approve the application. The next is to approve with condition or conditions. The HPB can also deny the COA or continue it to a date certain. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Andrea. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
I actually have a question.
Oh, you do? Go ahead.
You have the one condition that you have placed, which is inspection of the grout to just make sure that, in a mock-up, to make sure that the grout is consistent.
Yes.
If we were to approve, do we have to approve with a condition, or is an approval from this board, does that already take into consideration your condition? Is that right?
The board would need to reiterate the condition that staff is recommending as part of your motion to get that in there.
All right, thank you.
I believe that condition is already included in your draft resolution.
Great.
So if you approve the resolution as it is, I think it would include that condition. You wouldn't need to necessarily add that in.
So we'll just read that into the,
You certainly could. That would make it very clear.
thank you.
So, Andrea, I assume the word grout is the same as mortar? I mean, typically,
Yes.
bricks use mortar?
Yes.
Okay, but that would be the same thing. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Just a synonym. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Now we will have the applicant step forward, please, and make your presentation. Please give us your name and your place of business.
I am Mark Bourne. I am with Clutch Design Studios, architect for the project that we're working on. I don't know if get our PowerPoint to work.
Let's see, I think it's down in the corner right there. Advance it.
All right, thanks for bearing with me. So we were working with Shift Workspaces to adapt the mixed-use building, the second and third floor, to meet the new tenants' needs. And one item that we noticed was that the project needed a little bit more glazing in order to get all the new workspaces to have access to natural light and the views that the project affords them. So I'm just going to click through a couple elevations. You're probably familiar with the building. Our tenant is taking a small portion of the first floor and then all of the second and all of the third floor. On the west side of the project, we're proposing to add 2 new windows, which are on the left side of the screen, which would match the size of the windows adjacent to them. And then on the right side of the screen on level 2, there's that existing window that's going to be replaced with a pair of double doors and a window above it, exactly like the window and door adjacent to it, which would provide the tenants in that space, which is a conference room, access out to that balcony as well. On the east side of the project, we're proposing 1 additional light of window on the far north side of the building, highlighted behind the flag. In all of these changes to the existing envelope, we'll have, as Andrew mentioned, we'll match the existing materials with the exact same finish, exact same window specifications, really altering the final look of the building as minimally as possible to keep in the character of it. And on the third floor, on the west, on the terrace, we're proposing to add a storefront system in this highlighted area where there's the wood pilaster now, in order to give the common area on the third floor much more natural daylight and have the views out to the mountains as that terrace provides. And that is about it. That's the bulk of what we want to do, is basically taking a core and shell building that didn't have a specific user and adapting it to our tenants' workspace so that every office in there has the ability to have access to natural daylight. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
I have a
Laura?
question. On the west side, where you're proposing to put in 2 windows on the northwest end,
Yep.
what's in those areas right now? Why were there no windows put in there originally?
I don't know, we didn't design the original building. Right now, it's just, I can go to that, I can show you let's see. This is the existing elevation. So there's a span of about 20 feet on each floor from the edge of the existing window to that far corner, where it's just more of a dark space. I'm not sure why it wasn't put there to begin with, but.
And has the tenant already signed a lease, or are the changes, does the lease rely on the changes being made?
Yeah, the tenant has signed a lease.
So he will take the space regardless if there's windows or not then? Okay.
Yes.
Other questions?
I just want to clarify, when you say that the windows and doors that you're proposing will have the exact, I believe was the word that you used?
Yep.
So they will be I wouldn't be able to tell the difference?
Correct, yeah, they'll have the same dark bronze finish, be the same width and profile, and then the window glazing would have the same specifications that was used on the original project. So from the outside, you won't notice that something has been altered.
Are you using the same product, the same door, the same
We're
window?
specifying that, yes. And if that's what is contingent upon it with the building owners here, and it's our intention to keep the building as original as possible and have the aesthetics match. So we're proposing the exact same system, the Menco window system.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I have one for you. The pilaster that you're going to remove,
Yes,
is that a structural pilaster?
it's not.
No, okay. And that's going to become a storefront where that was, or?
Yeah,
where
it's
that is?
going to match the window. We have another view of it here. the window right next to, adjacent to it to the right.
Okay,
It'll be the same width.
okay, and that's now a
Right.
wall behind it?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah, currently there's a roof drain in that, so the roof drain would get moved inside and a glass would go in there.
okay. All right, thank you. And then on the cladding area of that third floor, that'll all just mimic exactly what you've got, and then have a sunscreen above that?
Correct.
On both east and west sides? Okay.
Yep.
That's all I had. Thank you very much. Now we'll have public comment on our application. Is there any public comment? Oh, it's not a public hearing? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, then we don't have public comment. Let's open the public hearing.
Thanks. So I didn't expect to have a public
Hearing.
timer's okay.
Better state your name anyway.
Pam Chadbourne, I live a block and a half from here. Sorry, I forgot that earlier.
I know, we want to
So
make sure that our TV audience knows who you are. Thank you.
For the record, into millennia, yes, I'm still Pam Chadbourne. I live a block and a half from here. So my comment about this is adding even more glass and glazing, I don't think is really like the downtown character. Sunscreens are great, and they should be added to match the rest of the windows, but the glazing and the glass, to me, I don't see that in the other buildings. And you know, the older buildings, the windows are more sparse because it was hard to put in windows and hard to maintain them. So really the character of downtown 1890s, I don't think has a lot of glass and big spaces and stuff like that. That's not what they built. Again, I'll just kind of say what I said before, which is we need, I think, a better understanding of what's here. I also just fundamentally disagree that this is the same or doesn't interfere with the adjacent buildings. And I do remember early on when we talked about design standards and guidelines that adjacent is considered across the street and nearby. It's not just contiguous. And so the Carnegie Library and the Masonic building, it's not the lodge is the lodge, the people, and the Masonic building is there. And these are two of the most important buildings in downtown. And this building from the beginning is too massive and too large, and now that it's going to have it already has a lot of glass, and to put more glass, it just makes it shinier and more gleaming, and I think it doesn't fit the character of either of those buildings, especially when you add it to the second and third stories, which are already. This should have been limited to 2 stories. It would have given you more options here. And with already a 3rd story up there, I think it's limited. Again, where do you draw the line? Does the next tenant then get to change something back? This to me raises questions about what our whole process, and I would really like you to look into strengthening our understanding of what protects the Carnegie Library, what protects the Masonic building. These, to me, are much more important than transient tenants. I do appreciate what they're trying to do. I have no problem with that. Maybe this building isn't the place for that, or maybe they can kind of live with what's there. I think, it sounds great. But the historic district is first. So, that's what I wanted to say. I don't think it's compatible with the adjacent buildings at all to add more glass here, especially on 2nd and 3rd stories, which everybody can see. And remember, the west side is the one that everybody sees when they come, and east side is what people see when they go down to Santa Fe. It's unavoidable. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Pam. Please state your name and address.
My name is Grant Barn. I actually live in Denver. I'm the founder of Shift Workspaces. We're the tenant at the new project. So we've signed a new 12-and-a-half-year lease. We'll be here for quite a while. We also plan on extending the lease at, I imagine we'll be here for 20 plus years, just to give you a little bit of background. So Shift as a company has been around for 7 years. Our first project was in Alma Placida in Denver. Our second project is in the Golden Triangle near downtown Denver. My background is in adaptive reuse and development. I've done a bunch of projects in Denver over time and have worked closely with Historic Denver on a handful of them. In fact, the last project that we did, we won the Adaptive Reuse Project of the Year with Historic Denver in 2017. We also won the Mayor's Design Award a year before. So we're super excited coming to Littleton. We think that, to give you a background, we'll have probably about 100 different companies, mainly small businesses. Our clientele are existing architects, attorneys, public relation firms, basically small businesses. We give them a home and a community to work from. And average age of our members is 40 years old. Most of the businesses have been in business for 7 to 10 years. And it's a thriving community that I think will fit very well into downtown Littleton. Our member demographic loves going out to lunch and doing yoga, and I think that will bring a lot of business to the retail, a lot of the retail stores and the restaurants downtown. It's our group is a pretty mature clientele. We call it mid-career professionals, and I think that they'll be very respectful of the community and will contribute a lot just by being there. As far as Shift as a company is concerned, we're a certified B Corporation, which is a very rigorous, I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but it's a certification for operating companies. It's similar to what LEED is for real estate development. We're also a carbon neutral company. We buy carbon offset credits every year. We have a zero carbon footprint in all of our facilities. And we're active in donating to our community. We donate over 1% of our gross revenue every year back into the communities that where we have projects. So the changes that we're proposing, the biggest one for me is the third floor storefront system that faces west. That'll actually be our main reception area when visitors walk into the building. And by adding that storefront, we'd be able to have the mountain views, and it'd be a real improvement to what we have right now just based on the design. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you guys have about our company or if there's any.
Thank you. We can't ask you questions, but
Oh, okay.
we appreciate your,
Well, I'll be around later if you want to talk to me afterwards.
thank you very much. Typically, the applicant may respond to public comment. Would you like to make any responses, sir?
State my name again?
No, that's okay. We know you.
Just reiterate what Grant said is what we're doing with the project is really trying to seamlessly get the users more daylight without really adversely affecting the nature of the design of the building. And that's about it. We just really think it's a wonderful addition to the neighborhood. It's a great building. It's going to bring a lot of people into the area to service Main Street and the stores that are there. The user group really does engage in the community, and typically it comes from the community in Grant's workspaces at Shift. I think architecturally what we're proposing fits into the design of the building seamlessly.
All right, thank you.
I just want to
Ashley?
clarify, sorry. I just want to clarify the record. On notice, it appears notice of a public hearing was given on November 8th, 2019.
That's what I thought. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Ashley. All right, well, any other comments, questions? Let's close the public hearing and get down to business. Would anybody like to make a motion? Then we can second and discuss. Andy, would you like to make a motion?
Sure. I move to approve HPB Resolution 4-2019, approving the Certificate of Historic Appropriateness for 2679 West Main Street, Littleton mixed use with the following condition. Prior to the application of any new grout used to reconstruct areas where brick was removed, a mock-up shall be prepared and reviewed by staff to determine a substantial match to the color and profile of the existing grout.
Second?
Second.
Lisa, thank you. Okay, discussion. Andy, want to kick things off?
I thought it was really very clear. They're being consistent. They've met all of our standards.
Kim?
I have to agree.
Laura?
I'm in agreement too. They meet the standards.
Hey, Lisa?
I agree. It's a pretty minimal visual impact. The windows and doors are a similar style to what was originally approved. They're really pretty minor changes to adapt to actually having a tenant. I think it's understandable to take advantage of the view of the west, on that west elevation. And even the windows fill a blank wall on the building, which I think is actually an improvement.
Yeah, I think the fact that the windows are all the same and the doors are all going to match. Had we seen this kind of proposal when we first approved the COA originally, it probably would have been approved. So the fact that we have a west side that is not visible from westbound traffic, only from northbound, I guess, and southbound Santa Fe. East side, that window is almost invisible back in the back there. And the fact that the pilaster is not really visible from the street or the west side that's going to be removed. And there's nothing that is going to be changed on the street elevation. So those are my comments. We ready to vote? All right. All in favor? I'm sorry, do you want to do it?
No, use the board.
Okay, ready.
The vote is four in favor. Kim, you're sitting at the
Oh, I'm at the wrong seat.
ER.
Where am I supposed to sit? Next,
You're
over here?
Yeah.
Can I
Flip
just
that
vote
one.
here? Sorry about that.
The vote is 5 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Yes, Laura? Oh, whoops. Pardon me? Turn that off. Okay, thank you, Colleen. I'm sure glad you're here.
Yeah.
Helping me through all of this. All right, well, then that part of our public hearing is finished, so let's go to staff reports, Community Development Director. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Any comments from staff? I don't see the Community Development Director, but glad you're here.
I have none today.
You have none? Mike,
I have
any?
none either. Thank you.
Okay. Board members, any comments, updates? Kim?
I think you could update us on there's only a few of us going to be sitting here for a while.
Yeah, that's right. Let's talk a little bit about two things. One is we had a wonderful dedication of the Littleton Post Office a week ago Saturday, and it was a wonderful turnout, a beautiful afternoon. Tours were given, cake was cut, and I think everybody had a tremendous time. And I understand, I don't think this is a secret, that the postmaster, Ken Price, has signed an application for a local designation as well. So I would assume we'll be working on that soon.
That's great.
Good. And then we want to congratulate our soon-to-be former member, Pam Grove, who was elected to the city council. And we are going to miss her deeply, but we are glad that we have a historic preservation advocate on the council, and we're going to be winging it all on our own from here on out until we have 2 new board members. I checked with the city attorney, and we don't replace board members during the term, so we will look for 2 more board members when we get to that point in February, after the interviews occur.
Yeah, applications will go live the first part of December, and they run through January 31st with interviews in December, appointments in March, and then they start in April. So,
Okay, great. So,
And then as far as.
Please come.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us, we have to be really good about attendance. Well, Amy and David, I forgot that.
yeah, you've got 7, so
Okay,
you're
we're
good. You
good.
just don't have any alternates
Yeah,
right now.
Well, and that means Lisa is now a full-fledged board member. Congratulations. I'm glad to have you with us. So don't let power go to your head. I guess if we have no other comments, we can adjourn the meeting.
Do you want to adjourn to a study session? Do you want to take a little break first?
Yeah,
or-
we're going to adjourn to a study session.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Colleen. What'd I do without you? taking some time to see if we could put together on Kim's suggestion, what are we really trying to do here, so. We have some purpose and goals, it's at the end of your packet, if you have that. So we'll I'll turn it over to Andrea and let you kick this thing off. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you. I don't really have a lot to say here, but and you know that I was not at the previous meeting. Two mics have filled me in, and Kim as well. I think it's clear we do need some structure around the program at this point. And I like the fact that each of you have gone out and had an opportunity to take surveys and see what shape these buildings are in, those buildings that were on the former list that we had. And so you kind of got your feet wet in it a little bit. Now with that experience, you can move forward on the next set of topics here. And so what we have set forth in the staff communication is a discussion on the purpose and goals of the program, then a name for the program, and then finally criteria for inclusion of structures. Under purpose and goals, what was provided here in the staff report is something that the chair has put together for us as a starting point. And then name for the program, well, I think it's been suggested that structures of historic significance might be a possibility, but it still needs to be, I think, settled on. And then finally, there's criteria for inclusion of structures within the program. And I have the city's criteria here for landmark designation. And many other communities do use the same criteria for landmark designation as they use for structures of historic merit, or whatever they call their program. So that's certainly one way of doing it. I did come across another community that has a different way of doing it, and that is listed in your report too. The structure is a minimum of 30 years of age and meets just one of three criteria. The structure is unique or rare. The structure is representative of a style in the city that is no longer prevalent. The structure contributes to a potential historic district. And not that the board would necessarily consider those three in particular, but just that there might be a different approach in assessing a structure and the desire for it to be on the list for all the reasons that that the board determines are important. So I'll turn it back to you, Mike.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. From the standpoint of, must be Santa Monica's code, I guess,
Yes, it is.
where it says the structure is representative of a style in the city that is no longer prevalent. If we come upon a structure that we think is historically significant, and there's a particular one that comes to mind, and it's the only one of its type in Littleton, would that qualify, and should we amend our, if we're down to the last one, in other words, should we amend our criteria to include something like that
For landmark designation?
for landmarking?
The first criteria states that it's unique, right? Or
Yes.
is that correct?
Yeah.
So if there were only one of that particular type, that seems to be
I think that satisfies.
the definition of unique. I'm sorry to jump in.
Oh, no, that's fine.
It says unique or rare. Rare would be one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
Yeah, that
I
would be-
don't know that uniqueness in and of itself would be strong enough reason to designate a structure as a historic landmark.
it would have
But
to
it
have
would be a
other,
consideration and perhaps multiple criteria.
but if it satisfied other criteria, it might give it extra weight for inclusion as a landmark.
That's the way I would say it.
I guess this is a question for later, so I'll defer on that one. Any other
comments, folks. So I took a crack at coming up with some goals for this project. And so I would love to have you weigh in and say, these are your good, bad, or indifferent, and are there other goals that we should be trying to include? And do we want to try to quantify the number of landmarks that we'd like to try to do landmark each year? Because it is a process, and council has to do the final approval, don't they, Andrea? For landmarking,
Yes,
local landmarks.
yes, that's
Okay.
correct. It's through an ordinance.
And since we have a number of them that we've already identified, are any on the, just because a survey's been done, does that mean it should be included as a possible landmark? Or are there certain ones that we say,
Well, here's how
modified too much?
Here's how the original program worked. There were 2 surveys done a few years apart, the first one for downtown and then the second one for identified properties throughout the city. And together, that was 900 surveys, 900 buildings were surveyed. And then a board member or 2 from HPB at that time went through the surveys and identified those that had special significance. And so the surveys were used to determine the level of integrity and significance. And from those 900 surveys, a small list was put together to be on what was then called a list of merit.
Okay.
So I think the survey is the tool to help the board and staff determine what is significant about a property.
Okay.
And so we are in the process of basically updating that survey. Is that right?
Yes, update as needed, at least for the time being. In the future, hopefully, we will be able to do surveys that would update what we have and in fact survey more properties. For some of these properties, what we already have surveyed may indeed be enough information to make a decision on that property.
The surveys, I believe the last survey was 2001. Does that sound right?
Yes, it does.
And boy, it's kind of scary to think that that's almost 20 years ago. And there are lots more buildings that are kind of coming due, if you will, that they're now old enough.
Oh, yes, I see what you mean, the survey itself updated as opposed to a survey of one property.
Right,
Yes.
right. And, obviously, as we kind of, we're tasked, to my understanding, with kind of ranging through the city and checking that original survey and the original lists to see if the structures are even still in existence or if they've been drastically modified or anything like that.
Yes. Yes. Yes, so, I would imagine that indeed there would be some more properties that are of interest and survey forms can be completed for those. And as an aside, I have contacted the state to see if they can provide training on how to complete survey forms. And they don't have a program or training as such for this, but there is somebody on staff who feels that she can put something together and that we can set aside a time for all the board members to come in and hear what she has to say and what would be the methodology for putting a survey together for a building that hasn't been surveyed previously. She was, by the way, she was very impressed that members of the board were interested in doing that.
Well, we are impressive, so.
Yes, you are.
Small but mighty. Andrew, do we have a budget in the city for performing surveys, or do we need to go outside and get a grant to, if we're going to do new surveys or update any existing?
Yes, so let me back up one step. So Littleton is a certified local government, which means that we have access to funds that come down from the federal government to the state and then the state divvies them to the various CLGs. And in order to meet the criteria to be a CLG, we do need to have a program to update our surveys. And we've never actually had a methodology on how to do that. We've determined, oh, we have a need over here, and we've applied for a grant and moved forward with it. And so I think that it would be great at some future point that we looked into how we really want to get the city surveyed and how we would determine what's most important. There is no budget set aside for surveying. As you probably know, the budget gets approved year by year. And so if we were to do something like this, typically what we would do is identify it well in advance that we're applying for a grant and we can get money from the state. They are competitive, and then the city would have a match available. Having a match is always something that makes makes our application more desirable.
Good. Well, should we come up with a name for this? And then we can continue to discuss. Does everybody like the idea of structures of historical significance as a capitalized name?
I think somebody at one of our previous meetings said something like Littleton Legacy, using the 2 L's. And I kind of liked that because historic significance is kind of like a term of art that some people don't know exactly what it means. Littleton Legacy is maybe less formal sounding, or it's like a Littleton Legacy. It doesn't have to be that specifically, but I did like that kind of more informal approach to it.
I agree with her, because the other one sounds like, oh no, this is, this is gonna be a big deal, they're gonna, my property may be affected. But Littleton Legacy sounds like, oh, this is kind of a hometown thing, our property's important, it's part of the legacy. I like that.
I think that's exactly what we're trying to accomplish, what you guys just said. So I think that's great.
Okay. Works for me. Littleton Legacy, that's what we'll call it.
Or Littleton's Legacies, what was it?
I don't know, it wasn't my idea originally.
I remember somebody saying
Somebody
something like
said it.
that. It could be Littleton Legacies in
Yeah.
plural.
Littleton Legacy Properties?
Maybe just Littleton, well, do we need to get the word properties in there to?
Well, Littleton Legacy, I guess it doesn't suggest what's to follow after that title to me.
Yeah, so you mentioned Littleton Legacy Properties. Sounds like a real estate firm. But that's what we're
Low
talking
commission
about.
though.
I'm just throwing it out, Littleton Legacies or Legacy. I'm not sure that is complete enough. If you agree
It
that
could
it
sound
is.
like a baseball team is what you're trying to say.
Littleton
Littleton,
Legacies.
is it better if it's Littleton's Legacy?
Littleton's Legacies.
Littleton's, apostrophe, possessive.
I see what you're trying to say. It doesn't tell you, from the title, it doesn't really tell you what it is, what we're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yes.
Littleton Legacy Structures.
Too bad they're not lofts. It could be Littleton Legacy Lofts.
So you're trying to think of something that sounds better than properties or structures, but I can't, like homes, of course, but they're not all homes.
Right.
So,
Could be more of like a branding effort than where it's not,
Littleton.
it isn't specific, but it's Littleton Legacy, and then however we determine the format of it eventually is, then you could have Littleton Legacy Homes and Littleton Legacy.
Or you could do Littleton Architectural Legacies.
And some of them are significant because of perhaps who lived there,
Not
an
architecture,
event
okay.
that occurred as opposed to the architecture.
Okay.
I think I like where you're going, Lisa. just Littleton Legacy is the program name, you don't need more than that necessarily, but then in your verbiage, when you talk about it, you can say, this is a Littleton Legacy property or home or structure or whatever. It takes away some, we were talking so much that last time about how it was kind of scary to some people, and so this kind of, I don't know, lightens it a little. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
We want to make it less intimidating.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you articulated it really well. That, and it was kind of scary, and that's what we were trying to avoid. So,
Just be a working title and we can think about it.
Yeah, that's good. Legacies or legacy?
I think just Littleton Legacy.
Legacy, okay. All right, well, let's go with that for now. That's a good idea, Lisa.
It was somebody else's idea, I'm just repeating.
Well, good memory, Lisa.
yeah, we'll take that.
I can't read my notes, so, okay, well, that's good.
So Littleton Legacy.
And as far as the purpose and goals, I just started a list, but we wanna work through them and make sure that we're being comprehensive and,
Can I ask a question
Yeah,
first?
sure.
Okay, so I was gone in July and August and drugged up in September, so who knows what I heard or didn't hear. So my question is, we're doing this now, is the purpose of all this to initiate a new survey and start all over, or is the purpose to renovate the survey that we have and look at it? And I mean, I guess I'm kind of confused, I didn't understand last time, I kind of knew what we were doing last time, we were talking about you all had gone out and looked at properties and said, yes, that one's good, or no, this one's no longer there. So what is the purpose of all this?
well, the primary purpose in working with staff was to, number one, provide a comprehensive inventory of these structures, of these legacy structures.
So would
To
that mean
help
we-
in neighborhood planning and preservation. Since we're going through a new zoning revision, it's going to be very important, I think, that these structures get identified during these zoning discussions. You know, we're starting with downtown, I think that's the first zoning area to be looked at, but it's going to be citywide. So I think, you know, to be able to identify these structures prior to that zoning discussion or as part of that zoning discussion, I think that's the number one goal, is to help for neighborhood planning.
Okay, so are we going to go over the whole, are we gonna, well, we actually did that already, I guess, as we took the survey and looked in the neighborhoods. So we're not gonna initiate a new survey.
I don't think we'll be doing a new one, will we, Andrea?
Well, yes
We
and
might update.
no. So I think, so we have the 900 surveys.
Right.
Some of which need to be updated. And then we have other, as Kim pointed out, we have many other properties that are significant that never got captured in that survey, either because they weren't of an age of significance 20 years ago, or because we have a wider focus at this point in time.
Alright, so will we be the only ones that bring the new properties to the survey? Or will residents be allowed to come in and say, gosh, I think this is a property you should look at for historic significance?
That hasn't been discussed yet, as far as I know.
Okay.
No, I think
That would be fantastic.
saw a good example tonight with Miss Bitts, you know, coming in, finding out that her property is historically significant and you know, looking forward to possibly doing something regarding landmarking.
Okay.
But I think as more building owners become aware of it, you know, some will be intimidated and some will be excited.
And is the list published so that everybody can look at it? Or is it only an internal thing that we can look at?
Well, that has to be decided too. One would think and hope that it would be public.
Okay.
But I think at least initially, it's for planning purposes. So, you know, it would be for city people to be able to identify very quickly, where do we have historic resources when we're doing any planning, whether it's redoing the zoning code or looking at a neighborhood plan or a corridor plan. We can have that into our geographic information system, and the ability to have that would just bring us forward by leaps and bounds, I believe. So, but I think that it would be very important for the community as a whole to know where the city believes its historic resources are as well.
Okay, I'm more up to speed, thank you.
Okay, good. And the other thing is to create the awareness in the Littleton community. Because a lot of people don't really know that they've got a structure of historic significance or a legacy. And when they find out, they're pretty excited. And they say, well, mine doesn't really qualify. And yet, it might, because it might satisfy a lot of those criteria. So if we can do that, we kind of talked about putting some of these structures up on the website. Sort of like cool buildings of the month or something like that, so that we could be able to create that sense of, oh, okay, and it's not, and again, non-threatening, but so you don't have to do anything with it, but if we could encourage people to do it willingly, that'd be great. So that's kind of the idea.
And you know what we did, what Andrea sent out for us to look at in the buildings that we looked at, that was not the 900.
Well, that's what I was wondering, because you guys only talked about a few properties, and then I
Yeah.
thought, well, maybe I'm confused.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was not the 900. That was the list of merit, the former list of merit. And that was kind of distilling down from the 900 to a very small group.
Okay.
And what we were doing is just going out and seeing, is the structure still there? Has it been, horribly altered? And I think what we found for the most part was that they were really intact. And that was encouraging. But yeah, the daunting 900 are still out there, unpeeped at, so.
I have a question now too. The properties that we looked at, you said were on the list of merit. None of the ones I looked at were eligible for designation. They were not contributing. They were great buildings, but had been altered too significantly. So how does a building like that make it to a list of merit?
Maybe it hadn't been altered 20 years ago when they first.
No, even in the survey, it
Oh, really?
said clearly this.
Well, the list of merit was formed before I was here
Okay.
by a couple of years. And Rick Cronenberger was on the board at that time and he headed up the program, so we could certainly ask him what methodology he used to put them on, but I'm not quite sure.
And I'm not trying to be critical, I'm just trying to understand, okay, what makes it to, because almost all the buildings I looked at, it hurt your heart a little bit that they had been altered because they were pretty cool historic buildings. So I can see why maybe they thought that there was still hope that it could be rehabbed in a way that would sort of bring it back. And I think maybe one could potentially be, but I don't know
That
that.
is interesting to hear because we haven't, in all these years, we haven't gone around and taken a look at those buildings that were on the list all these years. So you're kind of bringing this forward for the first time.
So there's not a pictorial database on all these properties then?
A current photograph? Well, no.
Only if we use Mike's Google Earth.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Great.
The assessor data has a photo.
Where were your properties,
Oh,
Andy?
that's right, it says it again.
All on Main Street.
On Main Street
downtown.
downtown? Okay, but none of them are they, any of them in the historic district? So some of them are.
Yeah, they're right on Main,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but they were all non-contributing.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember which one now, it's in the comments. One I thought, they kind of brought it back a little bit, but I don't know, I'd have to do a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if they were added to the list because they could become contributing again if you,
Right,
like, they've lost their integrity, but you could bring it back, and so
that's what I'm,
maybe that's the difference, is that it's still a significant structure, it's just lost its integrity, and if you made some changes, it could be significant again, or it could be
that's kind of what,
contributing.
yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering too.
And the location in and of itself has some historic significance, perhaps.
That's a good point. Okay, thank you.
But that should be noted, that it could be eligible because, George Washington slept here or something like that, And as you mentioned that, I had homes on Windermere primarily, that were really intact and wonderful, but they wouldn't have been, eligible
okay.
for, they could be maybe perhaps a local landmark, but they wouldn't, they wouldn't have been, they weren't special enough, I guess, is the.
Okay.
And not every building has to be a landmark too.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting getting out and taking a look at those and seeing which ones are unique and which ones could possibly be included. Okay.
And as we look at especially the mid-century modern homes in Littleton, I drove down a street today, kind of on my circuitous way here tonight, where the entire block was fabulous mid-century. I mean, it just could have been a historic district. Of course, I didn't bother to look at the street sign to see exactly what block it was, but I was like marveling at.
God, these are beautiful.
Is it off Windermere?
Yeah, it is. It's kind of by the library.
I think it's called Aberdeen.
It is Aberdeen Village.
No, it's
Well,
not.
it's an Aberdeen street, and that's west of Windermere that has some amazing mid-centuries on it, both sides of the street.
Yeah, there was one that it was like, oh, I want that.
Pretty spectacular. Okay. So, where should we go from here then?
I think for you were saying go one, or through the goals.
Look at the goals, okay?
Yeah. I think you did a really good job summarizing what we all talked about last time. It seems really comprehensive. All the things that were brought up. The only things, I don't know if we want, being on the subject of whether it's gonna be scary to people, I don't know if we wanna tie it to how many new landmarks are created from it. Like that might be intimidating if it's just a step to landmarking, especially for some that aren't even eligible because of their integrity, but we would still want those on there. I don't know if it should be the tier 1 kind of thing, like the first step to being landmarked, or if we want to distinguish them a bit more.
So don't quantify the number.
I wouldn't.
Yeah. I don't have any pride of authorship. I just wrote these down as they came to me, so if, I want the board to discuss this and come up with an agreement.
I was also uncomfortable with the quantifying the number for a couple of reasons. I don't know how we would just be pulling that number out of the air at this point, I think.
It'd be pretty random.
Because I don't know exactly how long this process would take on average in this city. Is it 3, is it 5, is it 10? You don't wanna set an unrealistic goal. So I would just strike that for now.
And Andrea, you probably have a good idea on, the whole process, what it would take to get X number of structures through in 1 year anyway. Would it be daunting to do 2 or 5 or 10? That would be almost one a month, so.
Well, it depends on how much other work I have, but.
Yeah, that's okay.
We like to keep Amber
busy.
Yeah,
Let's strike that one then.
Five actually doesn't seem very daunting at all.
That could maybe be something that's one of our goals, like a general goal every year, that doesn't have to be tied to this project.
We can.
Because if you said you had to have 2 each year, you might find that you're just picking 2 to make
Yeah.
2, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I really like number 6, I don't know exactly how it, like there's questions about how it ties to the future survey work, but I think about my house is 1947 and it just barely made the cut for the last survey, but now it's 74 years old, or wait, 72 years old, sorry, I can do math, which is pretty old, so it's been a long time since things have been surveyed. That basically means that anything built from 1950 to 1970 wasn't probably captured, which was a lot of Littleton's growth.
A lot of Littleton and really good stuff
Yeah.
too. So it is, riding around, it's, you see just how much work there needs to be done ultimately, because the city grew so fast in that period. I don't see it on this list, but I do think we talked about it at some point, and I thought it was on some list. And that was to move towards tiering some of these, creating tier
Yeah.
1s and tier 2s and tier 3s.
It's on the next page.
Oh, okay.
I know, I was looking too, and then I saw it.
Well, number,
Excellent, yes, there it is. I thought it was there.
and Kim, you came up with a few edits too. On number 2, to create awareness, I wrote among, but Kim wrote in, and I think that may be the better word there. Instead of among, the word is in,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
and then under,
because the community is in it.
right, okay. And then 3, preserve,
I just
preserving and
made those
conserving, yeah,
agree,
preserve,
That's all,
and not preservation, but preserving and conserving.
yeah.
And then strike 5, 6. And then on 7, as opposed to come up with, the word is develop.
Yeah,
So thank you for sending that back in.
no problem.
Any other goals, objectives you can think of?
Yeah, these are really good. I mean, this is, it's not an intimidating, scary list to look at these goals. I mean, it's just great. You did a good job.
And they make sense.
Yeah.
It's a distillation of all of your ideas.
Like, we can do this, you know?
Okay, we can
This
do
is
something
doable.
like this. Okay.
And Andrew, I had one question for you. You mentioned in the stuff that you came across, that one city was looking at 30-year-old structures.
Yes, yes, you know, typically the number is 50.
Yeah.
We do use 40.
Mhm.
But it could potentially be any number that I think that the city could justify as part of the program. You know, I think I have also seen it, now that I think about it, another city yet had the ability to landmark a structure that was less than 50 years of any age if it had extreme significance. So for example, if a future, you know, president of the United States was from Littleton and the house was built in the 1980s, you know, the city might want the ability to be able to establish that as a landmark. Something like that.
I like the idea of something less than the 50 years old. Because it seems like you want to have these things on the radar screen before they turn 50, so that you can kind of be prepared and act immediately and stuff like that. I've always, you know, I've never liked it that, you know, from a register perspective or any kind of, certainly from a grant perspective, that the building doesn't exist until it is 50. If it's 49 and a half, it does not exist. So I like the idea of maybe 40 is that good age. Maybe 30 is a little too young.
Well, you could just, you know, simply add and, you know, keep it at 40 or whatnot and say, and there may be exceptions to this rule.
Yeah.
Or exceptional significance.
I like that. Just kind of getting on that radar screen.
Although 40 years gives us to 1979, 1980, and there were a lot of neighborhoods built
Sure were.
in those years. That just brings your numbers way up, and a lot of them are just, you know, the same home, every third house kind of thing. So I don't know if 40 might be too much.
But you do have some gems in there. And it's not, you know, it's not like, you know, we would go out and survey every 40-year-old building in the city.
That's true.
It would be, they would just kind of be something to be considered.
Okay.
And in among some of those subdivisions, there might be a custom dwelling that
That's true.
was constructed, but yeah, you're right. In terms of overall neighborhoods, there might not be anything that appears to be significant in there, but, you know, but
Yeah, 'cause there was
going
mass
out and doing our
development, yeah.
footwork, we could find that.
Yeah, okay.
So Andrea, the process of a local landmark is to do what, a pre-app meeting first with an interested party?
Yes,
Typically,
that's
yeah.
right. The code says with city representative and the chair of the Historical Preservation Board. And then an application is made.
Based on that meeting.
Well, what usually happens at those meetings is a discussion about the benefits and the obligations of having a property that is a local landmark. And it's important for people to know what they're getting into because it is a big deal. And then the meeting is also an opportunity to talk about what, for example, might constitute historic significance and integrity. And so then the applicant puts an application together. And like other applications, for example, like a certificate of historic appropriateness, the application comes in, the staff reviews it, comments go back out, it's revised, and it kind of goes back and forth until it's ready to be forwarded to the Historical Preservation Board. And at that point, the board may have more questions and whatnot, and makes a recommendation to council, and then it moves up to city council for consideration of an ordinance. And once that ordinance is passed, it is considered generally permanent, that the structure would always be under the program. An exception or an instance where that might not be true would be if a portion of the building were destroyed by fire or flood, for example.
Okay, so at your pre-app meeting, you'd have a pretty good idea whether that structure was eligible or not. So if somebody wanted to do that pre-app meeting, came in and said, well, you would say, it really doesn't meet the criteria. But that way you could educate them that way?
Yes, the way I might put it is sometimes it's not evident, right? Because you don't know what may have happened there or a
Right.
pattern of events that it was associated with. So, you point out, okay, well, it might not be eligible under architecture, for example, but it could be eligible under these other criteria. And that will give the applicant an opportunity to do some research at the museum to see if there's maybe some other information that comes out that could bring it up to the level of being considered a landmark. And the other point to make is regardless of what I say, they have the right to submit an application
Oh, sure.
and bring it through.
You just need to know whether it's an uphill battle or not.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, or need to do some more research.
yes.
Okay, good.
I will also point out that, as you probably know, that with the zoning code rewrite that's coming right up, we're going to be doing the historical preservation code as well. And it does need a lot of modification to bring it up to date. And one of the things that will need to be modified is that criteria for landmark designation. So we will be seeing some changes there, and the board will be involved in those discussions.
So this project dovetails with what we're going to have to be working on for the new historic preservation.
Yes, yes.
That's good.
And I guess also during that process, we'll make a determination whether or not this new list has its own paragraph in the Historical Preservation Code that identifies it and talks about its goals and what its purpose is. The former list of merit did have a paragraph in the code, and then when it was dissolved, the paragraph was removed. Will we be also reviewing the landmark status obligations of the owners of the homes, or is that set in stone? Anything is up for reconsideration. Okay.
When it comes to local landmarks.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
In terms of criteria for this program, I think it's important to have criteria so that if you are using it for planning purposes, it has a defensible reason why something's on there, not just, oh, we like that house.
Exactly.
So we're gonna drop it on there. But I kind of like the approach, the Santa Monica example, the more simplified approach with just a few things that it needs to meet rather than being so prescriptive like the designation criteria. So I would lean towards the more general, like it's still criteria, but more general list of them that they have to meet to be able to make it onto the legacy property status.
Do we have in Littleton, something similar to the city's historic resources inventory? Would that be our whole list of merit? If we were looking at the similar thing for Santa Monica, that's under A, or the Santa Monica.
Oh, yes, yes. The surveys that we have, and of course, it's the two older ones, and now we have the Littleton Boulevard as well. And that together is our inventory of historic properties.
So it's not just the list of merit,
Not just that.
it's the 900.
900 now plus the 77 from
Yeah.
Littleton Boulevard,
There you go.
just short of 1,000.
All right. Well, so we got a couple things to work on. One is to see if there's some training available from the state. And the other is to kind of codify this, and should we come up with a resolution then, if we're in agreement to, and what do we do then, present that at a public
Yes,
meeting?
yes, so at the point when the board is ready to settle on criteria and a name, then the staff can prepare a resolution and we can bring it back and it would be considered at a regular meeting where you can vote on it.
Does everybody feel like, Lisa, we should simplify things a bit and maybe not have 15 different criteria, but maybe 4?
I think having 4 would be great. We can always put a subtext underneath it, you know, kind of add information to like number 1 or number 2 or number 3, but it makes it easier for people. I mean, this would be kind of like you'd want to come in and you'd go, oh gosh, do I meet all those? But this is a lot easier to look at. It's a little bit more user-friendly.
That's exactly what I was thinking, user-friendly. We've, ideally, in a perfect world, we would have homeowners and property owners, you know, taking this criteria list and saying, wow, maybe my property can be on the legacy list. So you do want it just absolute user-friendly.
I remember when I was a young board member and I looked at this, I was intimidated by it.
Still intimidated.
Still, yeah, I probably am.
It's a
I
lot
can
more
only get
than,
that through 11.
it's a lot more than most codes have.
Okay. Well, let's do that.
Are you looking, do you think, to come back next month and review what the shortlist would be? Or settle on something right now?
I think we could settle on something now. Don't you think? We can expedite the process a little bit.
Yeah, maybe go through and settle on some things and then if we need to tweak or you know, you need to look at it and say, I don't think that's really an objective criteria. We can tweak it for next month.
Well, on number 1, it says the structure is a unique or example of an architectural design. You could put of an architect, comma, architectural design, because there are some buildings in Littleton that we're looking at just because of the architect.
The architect, or, you know, they have builder. We have certain developers that were, you know, developed huge swaths of Littleton, and they might be significant, I don't know.
Yeah.
So architect, builder.
I had a couple on my survey that it was the builder more than the architect that was more significant, so that's a good point.
Charles Laufin would be a good
Yeah,
example of that.
Laufin would be a perfect one,
Yes.
yeah.
Nina Ensor was a developer that.
For the first one, cause it's A and B, is the first level. I think we could adapt that to say the structure's been identified as potentially local, like a potential local landmark in an existing survey. Would that kind of be the same level as what they're calling their historic resources inventory?
Yeah, yeah. That could, right, if the program were to get into tiering, I would think that the highest level would be a property that's been identified as eligible for landmark designation.
I'm sorry, Lisa, are you saying, I guess in my head, A, we just remove the capital letters of city's historic resources inventory, because we have an inventory of 3 surveys, right?
Yes.
But you're saying, no, let's say A is the structure's been identified as a landmark?
As potentially eligible for local landmark designation, since there isn't like a thing called an inventory. It's just something that's on a survey somewhere that it says it could be a local landmark.
Oh, I see.
Just that it's not
That's
one.
the highest level, and then the next level is B.
Yeah.
I got you now, thanks.
Those would be the ones that, even though we're trying to not make it like a step 2 designation, that would be the obvious one that would be on this kind of a thing, waiting to be designated.
And since we keep saying landmark, why couldn't we call this the Littleton Landmark Legacy?
You know, there was a third
Like
element.
the alliteration, right? So landmark doesn't cause any consternation or stress?
It has a does it have a definition in the code? Like landmark is,
Yeah,
Oh, yes, it does.
it does. So they might confuse it.
Yeah.
Too bad, I appreciate your going for that third
I
element.
know
I was trying to just,
I know, you got it there.
Sounds so much better.
I tried.
Okay. I'm just trying to decide if there's anything in this page 3 list of, 3 items under B, if there's anything missing.
I think what's missing, Andy, is if it exemplifies cultural, political, economic, or social heritage, or site of a historic event, or, if George Washington stayed there,
Yeah.
something like that. So somehow combine 9 through
Yeah.
maybe 12 or 13 in one.
I think there's in the national standards, there's a shorter way that they say that. Andrea, do you know?
Oh, I don't know.
The social, I can't think of how they say it, but there's only 4, I can't remember the spot, but there's a way that they say that that's more concise. But I like that.
Social or cultural,
Yeah, I can't, cultural is one of them.
yeah. Yeah, you can definitely combine, and the things that just, don't even make sense, we can take them out. There was one that I just didn't even understand what their words were saying.
Is 50 years the right target?
Sounds like we wanted to do 40.
Yeah. And then, obviously, the senior discount with 50 years is much better than the senior discount you get on 40 years. But, and we would just have to make that clear to homeowners. But I think 40 years is good because it does kind of get it on radar screens.
Do we even need number 2 because isn't rare and unique? It's no longer prevalent.
Yeah, agree.
Well, also, yeah, we don't need that because, we will have buildings, structures that we want on this list that are prevalent in the community. Because we are relatively, we are of an era in Littleton, so.
And what does 8 mean? It has undergone significant historic remodel. Does that mean they brought it back to the way it was before?
Yeah, that one seems like out of place.
Yeah.
I don't think that one is even, that wouldn't work on a national level. Some of these are, they're putting it on a list to try to have objective criteria, but I think some of them are really subjective.
Yeah.
And I think we want to stay away from that.
That number 5, is that something you would?
No,
5 could replace 2, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, just to get at the point you were just making,
about,
it's not
Kinda
just that we
squishy.
want only the rare stuff, we
Yeah.
want stuff that's representative and important, that tells the story and the
Yeah.
history.
in 5, I think you're right. Because, the mid-century moderns that we have, just as an example, I mean, you do see the same house, but some are better than others, but there are lots of them. So, some of them are really significant. But some of these criteria are a little squishy.
So the National Register criteria that I was thinking of, there's that are associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of our history. And then the other one I was thinking of was that are associated with the lives of persons significant in our past. I was trying to think.
Yeah.
Associated with events or people.
Events are people
sounds
that, shaped the community. Should we just go down this list and kind of scratch through some and write combined?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think 1 and 2 could be combined.
Yeah. I think 3 and 4 can kind of be worked into 1 and 2, that it's all about the designer who made it.
Yeah.
Those are all the kind of,
Yeah.
well, actually, really, all of these are, 1 through 5 are all about architectural style. Then you get into the,
And again, the, 2, or not 2, 3 and 4, you could not articulate separately, but they would maybe fall under builder or architect. But again, that, especially 3 it can be a little bit subjective. Because my high artistic value may be different than someone else's. And the style particularly associated with Littleton, I mean, that's a good one. But that is exactly the same as number 1, really.
Yeah. Okay.
these are really specific compared to other cities that I've looked at.
I thought we were going for a shorter list.
Yeah, much shorter list.
Like, as in 3 or 4 that we were starting with on B.
Well, I thought we're just looking at this and cutting stuff, basically.
Okay.
And then see if that fits into what we have on the second page.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if we have number 1, we don't need number 5. We can
Yeah,
just say
good with
it's
that.
associated with the Littleton area. And we don't need number 6. Because we just talked about, well, we talked about it. I don't know if we put it in.
The ones that Lisa read off.
Yeah, the ones that Lisa read off. Oh, yeah, up in, under A. I mean, that would be covered off on A. And then number 7 is redundant in my mind.
Number 15 is funny. Established and familiar.
I don't even know what that means.
That doesn't seem legal, like objective.
Yeah.
14's kind of subjective as well. Seems like we could combine some of these about the social, cultural, and historical events in association with notable person.
And that seems to be under A. Criteria of properties receiving blah, 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 40 years old.
Oh, I see, and under the current.
Oh. I can't look at this.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Yeah, what you talking about?
Under A on page 2.
Yeah, 2, when it says criteria, and it, you know, the 40 years old, except as otherwise approved, and possess architectural, social, geographical, I mean, a lot of these, that are kind of blown out down here, are covered under that, social. And we could add the word cultural,
I think that's a good way to do that, add cultural in there.
yeah, and then, you know, that, you know, political, economic, all of that is rolled up under cultural. Association with a notable person is social. An event, I do think you need to have event up there.
You know, it's funny the way it's written, tell me if I'm being too picky, but under A criteria, this sort of sentence, it sort of lays it out. But then it puts the decision-making on whether or not it meets one or more of the following. So it almost, does it do us any good to have it in the beginning part?
Well, if we're going to be really concise and if you're only going to have a few criteria, then I think by definition, you've got to roll them into, you know, a shorter sentence. Like properties receiving historic designation shall be at least 40 years old, except as otherwise, you know, I don't know about the provided herein, possess architectural, social, geographical, environmental importance, or event importance. And then that would be the like period.
Yes, that helps what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Or you could say, and must meet if you really want to make sure they get more, not by meaning one of.
Yeah, I'm trying to basically cut stuff from this, if we want to make it.
Kind of aligns with the national criteria but we've cut it down to, because there's architectural reasons, events, people, and other like cultural, social things, which are the 4
Yeah.
main ones. So it might be easier not to get caught up in the language that's on here, and this is very legally written. But it's the Santa Monica example, we just take what we liked from that and infuse what's missing into this example, it might read a little easier.
Okay.
I would take 8 out completely, I don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
Yeah, very weird.
I've struggled with that over the years. And what I think maybe it means is that sometimes you have an older building and then it's been significantly remodeled, and the addition in and of itself is what makes it historic, because it was perhaps done by a master builder, or represents a significant style, or an event happened there.
these been modified over time, or was this?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
This is how they started off.
Yeah, 9 and 13 are the same, and they're just an event. 10, I don't think it's necessary, because you know, you're not really defining anything more than what you've set up there at the top.
And what if we were to combine all of those to say something like represents or exemplifies a social, cultural, or historic event or association with notable person?
Yeah,
All be in one
that pretty much.
piece, that kind of covers it all.
Yeah.
And do we want to have it where the structure contributes to a potential historic district like they do in Santa Monica?
Do we have, are there potential historic districts identified?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Then yes.
I think your house might be in one of them.
Really?
Do you think?
I don't know where you live.
Famous in Maplewood?
Could you talk louder?
Me?
All of you.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, possibly.
Okay.
I'll look
I
it
know,
up
well, I know
tomorrow.
it was in the survey, but it was like the last block that got surveyed for the downtown.
I'll check it out tomorrow, I'll let you know.
What's the standard for number 12? I kind of like the impact on the cultural significance, but do we already have that covered in cultural significance?
I thought we were gonna add cultural up here, so it says
Right.
possess architectural,
We
social,
did.
cultural, or
So we can-
geographical. Yes, we
Yes.
can get rid of that one too.
So 10, 11, it's basically 5 through 15 is out, because it's, we're putting it up in that other
Right.
one that Mike
Exactly.
said. Okay, great, thanks.
So basically, we have A criteria that we wanted to use, A from the Santa Monica one. And then we wanna do B and modify the B a little bit.
So number 1 under that could be the structure is a unique or rare example of an architect, builder, or an architectural design, detail, or historical type.
Yeah.
Represent.
And then
And then we would cut to, I think.
Good.
cut 2, and we could put in on 2, we talked about replacing it with number 5, represents a
Well,
style.
Instead of 5, it was like number 1.
Oh, that's right, you're right.
Yeah, we kind of were gonna blend 1 and 2, I think.
Okay.
Well, no, we got 2,
1 and 5.
so 1.
Yeah, because we wanted it to say something about style particularly associated with the Littleton area.
Yeah.
So that would go under like number 2 right in there. And then 3 we would keep, the structure contributes to a potential historic district. And then 4, didn't we want to use some language from the historic Denver or the state of Colorado?
That's why we were gonna do something about the events and people, but I think you already covered
That-
that.
did that work, do you
What
think?
said.
Okay.
Represents or exemplifies social, cultural, or historic event or an association with a notable person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we've got like on page 2 of 3, A, criteria, properties receiving historic designations shall be at least 40 years old, and possess architectural, social, cultural, geographical, and environmental importance. The only thing that's missing from there is really events. I don't know. And then I would just put period in. I mean, I'd start ours with that, cause I think it kind of knocks off the age and rolls up a lot of the stuff into it.
Where would geographical or environmental come into play?
Well, I believe the geographical would have to do something like came up before, Main Street. It's
Okay.
it has geographic significance, the structures there do.
What is environmental?
Environmental, so not all landmarks are structures necessarily. They can be parks, objects, and other sorts of places.
Something that represents the flood.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an environmental.
Or canal,
Little
ditches.
The ditch, for
Okay.
example. Oh, that's good. It could be.
Even though
former-
they're man-made structures, it's still environmental.
So we wanna use that A, and then do we want to use the structure has been identified as a potential local landmark through a survey?
Yeah, I
As
think
well.
so.
Okay, so both of those. And then go into B,
I think that's good.
combine them up. All right. I think I have notes, I can write these up for you, Andrea.
That would be great.
And then, yeah, and you can see you can tell us the big one that we missed, you know?
Yeah. Well, and you're all free to take a look yourselves and give me comments.
Yeah.
And we also have Amy and David that can take a whack at it as well.
That's true.
They might spot something,
Yeah, that's a good idea. Well, good. Then you'll let us know about potential training with the state. If we can
will.
do something like that, that'd be great.
Yes, we may have a fairly full meeting already for December, although we may possibly have a certificate of appropriateness. I'm waiting to see on that. And so we might want to wait until winter, January, February for the training.
Oh,
Well, the training wouldn't be I would envision a slightly
Separate.
more robust training than what's
In a study
what we
session.
could do here, yeah. You know, maybe we could do a Saturday morning or some, retreat type thing.
Sure.
Treat it as a separate training. Cause I think again, if we're trained for consistency, that's gonna help make this more objective and less subjective.
Yeah. Well, and we're gonna have a couple new board members too coming into the next year, so maybe it'd even be better to wait. Well, I hate to wait too long, but it'd be good to get new people involved in the process as well.
Well, they could maybe mentor with
Yeah,
those
that's
of you
that's
who
true,
have
too.
been
We could do that, for sure.
Exactly, we could do that.
Alright. Any other comments, questions? Questions for staff?
I was just gonna say, it might be helpful to reach out to the Santa Monica staff and see if they've had any issues with those criteria, or if like one's a sticking point, or people
That's a good point, maybe they're about to rewrite it or.
yeah, or like this really hasn't
This
worked
didn't work,
or
yeah.
something. I think they'd probably be happy to share their stories, so it might be helpful.
And speaking of properties associated with significant people, I found out that Alan True, the muralist, he has a lot of the murals, well, like the murals in the Brown Palace, for instance, are done by Alan True. He's got stuff in the Denver Art Museum and the, one of the big buildings downtown, I think the old Telcom building, the Mountain Bell building or whatever it was called. And he is the artist that designed the Wyoming license plate, the bucking bronco. He actually lived in Littleton. Yes, he had a farming type property somewhere in Littleton. So I can find out where.
Well, maybe there's an important person, maybe.
There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll see if that property is still in existence because that would be good.
All right, well, thanks, everybody. Great thoughts and
Yeah,
comments.
good
and-
meeting.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming up with the goals.
Sure.
Yeah.
That would have been hard to do by committee.
Everything's hard to do by committee.
That's true. So we need to come up with that elusive third L.
Yes, I tried. We'll come up with
It's in
something,
there,
yeah.
it's in there somewhere.
Legacy locales.
Locations.
Laura's landmark list.
There you go.
Thank you, Mike and Andrea.
Yeah, thank you.
We made some good
progress.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is exciting. Next, Andrew will come in with a list of 900 and flop.
977, I think it was.